Hello, my name is Lincoln. I'm 35 years old, and I'm an aircraft maintenance engineer at Des Moines International Airport in Iowa. My life revolves around massive airplanes, roaring engines, and long days inspecting every bolt and wire to ensure everything is perfect before takeoff. I love this job, not just because it demands precision, but because it gives me a sense of control, a feeling that everything is in order the way I've always wanted my life to be. But today I don't want to talk about airplanes. I want to tell you about a special day, the day I thought I'd reached the biggest dream of my life, a home, a true haven for my family. 10 years. That's how long my wife Quinn and I have been grinding, saving every penny, living in cramped rental apartments, sometimes sharing bathrooms with noisy neighbors. Quinn, who's 33, is an accountant for a furniture company downtown. She's thoughtful, practical, and always knows how to keep our household from descending into chaos. But if I'm being honest, I know Quinn is deeply influenced by her parents, especially her mother, Marlene. They're the kind of people who want everything to go their way. And Quinn, though she'd never admit it, often lets her emotions get swept up in her mother's advice, or rather, her commands. We have 2 kids. Monica, 8 years old, a lively, sensitive girl who clings to me every time I come home from work, and Noah, 5, a hyperactive boy who's always running around the yard asking silly questions I never tire of answering. They're everything to me. Every time I see Monica's scribbled drawings or hear Noah talk about the dinosaur he saw in the garden, all my exhaustion melts away. That day was a crisp autumn afternoon, the sky clear and the air cool, and I was standing in front of our new home, a 3-bedroom house we'd just bought after years of scrimping and saving. It wasn't a mansion, no pool or tennis court, but to me it was the world. A house with a white picket fence, a cozy backyard big enough for Noah to run around in, and a front porch where I could sip coffee every morning. It was the dream Quinn and I had painted back when we were dating, sitting on a park bench, eating sandwiches and talking about one day having a place to call home. I remember that moment vividly. We were moving in. Monica was running around the yard, clutching a red crayon, drawing wobbly circles on cardboard boxes. Noah was clinging to my leg, asking, "Dad, can we get a dog here?" "A really big one." I laughed, ruffled his hair, and promised I'd think about it, though I knew Quinn wouldn't agree right away. She always needs time to weigh things, especially when it comes to the order of our home. Quinn was in the kitchen, unpacking boxes, arranging plates and bowls with the care I've always loved about her. Her brown hair was tied up, a few loose strands falling over her forehead, and she was smiling. That gentle smile I fell in love with 15 years ago. "Lincoln, have you seen the blender anywhere?" she called out from the kitchen. I shook my head, pretending to be annoyed. "Honey, if I knew where it was, I'd be a superhero by now." Monica overheard and giggled while Noah chimed in, "Dad's a superhero. Dad's a superhero." I held a small wooden sign with the words, "Home Sweet Home," carved in elegant script. It was a gift from my parents, George and Evelyn, when we signed the house contract. I carefully nailed it to the front door, feeling each hammer strike mark a milestone. With every thud, my heart felt lighter. This wasn't just a house. It was proof of 10 years of hard work, late nights budgeting, petty arguments over money, and the moments when Quinn and I held hands, promising to build a future together. That evening, we threw a small housewarming party. Friends, co-workers, and both sides of the family came. My parents, George and Evelyn, drove 2 hours from their small town outside Des Moines, bringing a tray of homemade cookies, my mom's specialty. Quinn's parents, Harold and Marlene, showed up too, with a bottle of expensive wine that Harold wouldn't stop bragging about as a rare find. The 2 families aren't exactly close. They exchange polite greetings and stiff smiles, and I know why. My parents are simple, principled people who respect others' space. Quinn's parents, especially Marlene, have a tendency to want to control everything, from table settings to how others should live their lives. I tried not to dwell on it, thinking today was a happy day. No need to sweat the small stuff. The party was filled with laughter and chatter. Monica and Noah ran around the yard playing tag with the neighbors' kids. Quinn was busy hosting, making sure everyone had drinks and desserts. I stood by the backyard grill, flipping ribs, stealing glances at her. She wore the light blue dress I love, her hair loose over her shoulders, her eyes sparkling with joy. I thought to myself, this is the moment I've worked my whole life for. When the guests had left, it was late. I carried Monica upstairs. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, still clutching her favorite doll. Noah trailed behind, rubbing his eyes, half asleep but still asking, "Dad, can I sleep in the backyard tomorrow?" I chuckled, tucked Monica into bed, pulled the blanket over her, and turned to Noah. "We'll have to ask your mom, little man." He nodded, yawning, and passed out moments later. I stepped out onto the porch, looking at the golden light spilling from the living room window. This house, with its white walls, pristine windows, and the sound of our kids' laughter, was everything I'd ever dreamed of. I felt a peace I rarely experienced in our years of struggle. I'd done it. We'd done it. Then I felt warmth from behind. Quinn wrapped her arms around me, her cheek resting lightly against my back. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft as the night breeze. "Thank you for giving us a real home." I turned, looked into her brown eyes, and smiled. "We did it together, love." She nodded, then said quietly, almost offhandedly, "Now my parents can come visit whenever they want." I laughed, nodded, thinking it was just a passing comment. Her parents lived nearby, and I knew they loved Monica and Noah. Them visiting often was normal, right? I didn't think much of it, just pulled her close, kissed her forehead, and together we stared out at the dark yard, where tomorrow Noah would be running around asking me more silly questions. But looking back, I realized that moment wasn't as simple as I thought. Quinn's words, light as a breeze, were the first gust of an approaching storm. I didn't see it, wasn't prepared, and had no idea that our dream home was about to become a battleground, where love, family, and invisible boundaries would be tested to their limits. The first few months in our new home felt like a beautiful dream. Every morning I'd wake up early, brew coffee in the kitchen still fragrant with the scent of new wood, and listen to the birds chirping in the yard. Monica and Noah usually woke up later, chasing each other around the dining table, laughing while Quinn prepared toast and eggs. I'd sit there watching my family, feeling that everything was perfect. Work at the airport was still hectic, but it no longer weighed on me like before. This house, with its white walls and sunlight streaming through the windows, was a constant reminder that all my efforts had been worth it. Quinn's parents, Harold and Marlene Dawson, started visiting more frequently. At first, I thought it was great. They brought boxes of food, stews, pies, sometimes a massive tray of lasagna that Marlene proudly declared was a family recipe. Monica and Noah adored their grandparents. Noah especially loved sitting on Harold's lap, listening to his stories about his days as a banker, though I'd bet Noah didn't understand much beyond the booming, enthusiastic voice that made it sound like a magical world was unfolding. Marlene always brought gifts for the kids, a new dress for Monica, a puzzle set for Noah. I smiled, grateful for their affection, thinking it was their way of showing love for their grandchildren. But then, things began to change slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Weekend visits turned into midweek drop-ins. Then they were showing up every day, sometimes staying late, sitting in the living room watching TV with the volume so loud it drowned out Monica reading in her room. I tried to stay cheerful, telling myself they just wanted to be close to family. After all, they were the kids' grandparents, right? I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Marlene started leaving her mark on the house. One day I came home from work to find the living room curtains, the pale green ones Quinn and I had argued over for a week to pick, replaced with garish floral ones. "I thought these suited better," Marlene said, her tone light but brimming with the confidence that no one would dare object. I frowned, looking to Quinn for an explanation, but she just gave an awkward smile. "Mom just wanted to help, honey. It's no big deal." I nodded, swallowing the irritation rising in my chest. Then Harold got involved. He liked to sit in the living room smoking cigarettes despite my clear request that I didn't want smoke in the house. He'd just laugh, wave a hand and say, "Come on, Lincoln, a little smoke won't hurt." I smoked all day back in the day and I'm still here. I tried to stay calm, but every time I walked into the living room and smelled cigarette smoke clinging to the sofa, I felt like someone was invading my space. Quinn didn't seem to notice, or maybe she did but didn't want to face it. Whenever I gently brought it up like, "Babe, I think your parents are here a bit too much. We need some space," she'd shrug and say, "They just want to help, Lincoln. You're overreacting." I started to feel like an outsider, as if my opinion no longer mattered in the very home I'd poured my sweat into buying. Then one day, things went too far. I came home late, exhausted after a long shift inspecting aircraft engines. As I walked in, I heard lively chatter from the living room. Monica and Noah were playing with puzzles on the floor, while Harold and Marlene sat on the sofa, watching a game show on TV. Quinn was in the kitchen cleaning up. I greeted everyone, trying to keep my tone upbeat, but something felt off. I noticed several large suitcases stacked in the corner of the room. My heart beat faster. "Whose suitcases are those?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Quinn stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes flickering with unease. Honey, my parents are going to stay with us for a while." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "Stay? What do you mean?" She took a deep breath and spoke quickly, as if trying to end the conversation before it started. "They're going to live with us. Their house is a bit far, it's inconvenient to travel, and they want to be close to the kids. I thought it'd be better, easier to take care of each other." I stood there, stunned, feeling like someone had punched me in the chest. "Live with us? Here, in our house?" I glanced at Harold, who was laughing loudly at a joke on TV as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Marlene got up, rearranging the throw pillows on the sofa, acting like this was already her home. "You don't mind, do you, Lincoln?" she asked, her voice sweet but laced with challenge. I wanted to yell, to ask why no one had discussed this with me, but Quinn's eyes, almost pleading with me not to make a scene, silenced me. I nodded, muttering through gritted teeth, "No, it's fine." But inside, I knew everything had changed. In the days that followed, it became clearer. Marlene started controlling nearly everything in the house. She reorganized the dishes in the kitchen, decided what we'd eat for dinner, and even interfered with how Quinn parented the kids. "Monica needs to eat more vegetables," she'd say, as if Quinn and I didn't know how to raise our own children. Harold took over the living room, leaving half-smoked cigarettes on the coffee table despite my request that he smoke outside. I tried to hold it together, to keep the peace, but with every passing day I felt pushed further out of my own family. Quinn still didn't see the problem. She acted like it was all normal, as if her parents running our household was natural. "They just want to help, Lincoln," she'd repeat, like a mantra. But I knew, deep down, she was trying to convince herself too. I started to realize she didn't want to confront her mother, didn't want to upset Marlene. And I, the husband, the father, the one who'd sweated to build this home, became invisible. One evening I sat on the porch, staring at the light spilling from the living room. Monica and Noah were asleep, but the TV blared from the living room, where Harold was watching football. I heard Marlene in the kitchen instructing Quinn on how to make a soup she deemed better. I took a sip of my beer, trying to suppress the suffocating feeling rising in my chest. "This is my home," I told myself. So why did I feel like I didn't belong here? I didn't know it then, but a real storm was brewing. The invisible boundaries in this house were about to shatter, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop the cracks from spreading. The days after Quinn's parents moved in, our house stopped being the haven where I once stood on the porch, smiling with contentment. It felt more like an arena where I had to tread carefully with every step to avoid breaking something, or rather to keep the simmering tensions from erupting. But the truth was, no matter how hard I tried, everything was slipping out of my control. Marlene seemed to have taken over the house entirely. Every morning I'd wake up to find her in the kitchen rearranging the spice cabinet to her liking, even though Quinn had said she preferred things the way they were. "This is more practical," Marlene would say, her tone soft but laced with an unshakable certainty that brooked no argument. New curtains, repositioned paintings, unfamiliar vases appearing on the dining table, all bore her mark. I tried to brush it off, telling myself these were small changes, but every time I walked into the house it felt like stepping into a stranger's home. Harold, meanwhile, claimed the living room. He'd sit in my favorite armchair, feet propped on the coffee table, watching football games at a volume so loud it drowned out Monica reading in her room. The smell of his cigarettes lingered in every corner despite my repeated requests that he not smoke in the house. "Lincoln, you worry too much," he'd say with a smirk, as if I were some fragile man who didn't know how to live freely. I clenched my jaw, trying to stay calm, but every time I saw cigarette ash on the carpet, it felt like a stab at my pride. What hurt most was the kids. Monica, my sensitive little girl, started to change. She no longer ran to hug me when I came home from work. Instead, she'd sit with Marlene listening to her stories or baking. Noah was drawn in by Harold, who teased that I was too strict for not letting him have candy before bed. "Your dad's too serious, huh?" Harold would say, winking at Noah, who'd giggle, unaware that those words were slowly eroding my role as his father. I felt like I was losing my kids right in my own home. Quinn, as usual, didn't see the problem. Or maybe she didn't want to. Whenever I tried to bring it up gently, saying her parents were interfering too much, she'd sigh and shake her head. "Lincoln, they just want to help. Why are you making a big deal out of this?" I wanted to scream, to ask if she could see that I was being pushed out of my own family, but her weary eyes silenced me. I knew she was caught in the middle, torn between her love for me and her loyalty to her parents. But that didn't make it hurt any less. I was her husband, the father of our kids, but now I felt like a stranger in the home I'd poured my sweat into buying. One evening I couldn't take it anymore. I came home exhausted after a long day, wanting nothing more than to sit down and have dinner with my family. But when I walked in, I found Marlene in the kitchen directing Quinn on how to make a stew the right way. "You're doing it wrong, Quinn. You need more salt," she said, her tone authoritative. Quinn nodded, complying obediently, though I knew she hated being micromanaged in her own kitchen. In the living room, Harold was watching TV, the volume so loud I had to shout to ask where Monica was. "Upstairs, probably drawing," he replied, eyes glued to the screen. I went to Monica's room and found her sitting on her bed, clutching her doll, her eyes red. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, sitting beside her. She hesitated, then whispered, "Grandma said I shouldn't draw so much, that I should learn to bake with her. But I don't want to." Her voice trembled and I felt my heart constrict. I hugged her, promising to talk to Grandma, but deep down I knew things had gone too far. That night, after the kids were asleep, I pulled Quinn out to the porch. I tried to keep my voice calm, but every word felt like it was being squeezed from my chest. "Quinn, we need to talk. Your parents, they're controlling everything. I feel like I don't have a place in this house anymore." She looked at me, her eyes flickering with unease, but then her expression hardened. "Lincoln, you're blowing this out of proportion again. They just want to help. Don't you see how much they love Monica and Noah?" "Help?" I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. "They're turning our home into theirs, Quinn. I don't get a say in anything. Not meals, not how we raise our kids. I feel like an outsider." She shook her head, stepping back. "You're being selfish, Lincoln. They're my parents. I can't just kick them out because you're uncomfortable." The conversation ended with her turning back into the house, leaving me alone on the porch, staring at the light spilling from the living room, feeling like my world was crumbling. In the days that followed, I withdrew. I left for work earlier, came home later, sometimes eating dinner alone at a diner near the airport. I avoided Marlene and her sharp, cutting remarks like, "Lincoln, you work too much, you don't pay attention to your family." I avoided Harold and his jabs about me being too strict or not knowing how to enjoy life. Worst of all, I started avoiding Quinn because every time I looked at her, I saw disappointment. Not because she was angry with me, but because I couldn't protect the space that belonged to our family. The atmosphere in the house grew heavy, like we were all performing in a play. We still talked, laughed, and ate dinner together, but no one was really listening. Monica became quieter, often retreating to her room. Noah kept running around, but I noticed he started listening to Harold more, as if he were the real father. I felt like I was losing everything: my wife, my kids, and the home I'd thought was our sanctuary. One evening, I sat on the porch holding a cold beer, staring at the yard where the kids' laughter no longer echoed. Inside, I could hear Marlene telling Quinn about how to raise kids back in the day. I heard Harold's loud laugh over a football game, and I heard my own heart beating slowly, heavily, like it was counting down to an inevitable explosion. I knew that if I didn't do something, I'd lose everything. But what could I do when the person I loved most was standing on the other side of the battle line? The weeks that followed turned our house into a foreign place. I no longer recognized it. When I came home, I'd quietly slip through the living room, avoiding Harold's gaze and Marlene's veiled remarks. I'd retreat to the study, close the door, and sit there, staring at the family photos on the wall. Moments of happiness when we were still a real family. One evening, I decided I had to have a serious talk with Quinn. I couldn't keep living like this, like a ghost in my own home. After the kids went to bed, I pulled her out to the porch. The night was cold, the wind rustling the trees in the yard. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Quinn, I can't take it anymore. Your parents, they're controlling everything. I feel like I'm not part of this family anymore." Quinn looked at me, a flicker of pain in her eyes, but she quickly turned defensive. "Lincoln, what are you talking about? My parents just want to help. You want me to kick them out? They're my family." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "I'm not saying kick them out, but don't you see? They're deciding everything, from how we raise the kids to how we live. I'm suggesting maybe we could help them rent an apartment nearby. They'd still be close to the kids, but we'd have our own space." To me, it was a reasonable solution, but to Quinn, it was an insult. "You're so selfish, Lincoln," she shouted, her voice rising with a fury I'd never seen before. "My parents have sacrificed so much for me, for the kids. And now you want to push them out? Do you know how much that would hurt them?" I stood there, stunned, feeling the ground crumble beneath me. I wanted to say that I was hurting too, that I was losing my family, but my throat tightened and the words wouldn't come. The conversation was cut short when Marlene appeared at the door. "What's all this noise about?" she asked, her tone icy. I knew she'd heard everything. Her eyes bore into me with contempt, as if I were an ungrateful wretch. "Lincoln, you should be thankful for what we do for this family," she said, then turned back inside, pulling Quinn with her. Quinn didn't look back, just followed her mother, leaving me alone on the porch, the cold seeping into my bones. From then on, things got worse. Marlene and Harold tightened their grip. They meddled in every decision, from what extracurriculars Monica should take to how Noah's hair should be cut. I felt like I had no authority in my own home. At every meal, I sat silently, listening to Marlene lecture on the right way to raise kids, hearing Harold jab at me for working too much. Quinn said nothing, just kept her head down, as if she'd given up on standing by my side. I started sleeping in the study on a cramped sofa. I told Quinn I needed space to work late, but the truth was I couldn't bear the suffocating feeling of lying next to her, knowing she was no longer my partner. I felt like a stranger, a tenant in the home I'd bought with my own sweat. The breaking point came one evening when I got home late. I walked in, hoping to have dinner with the kids, but the scene before me stopped my heart. Monica and Noah were eating dinner with Harold and Marlene, laughing and joking happily. Quinn was in the kitchen cleaning up as if nothing was wrong. No one noticed I'd come home. No one had saved me a plate. I stood there in the doorway looking at my family, but I was no longer part of it. The feeling of being excluded, abandoned, cut into me like a knife twisting in my chest. I quietly went to the study, closed the door, and sat down, staring at the family photo on the desk. In it, we were smiling, standing in front of our new house with the "Home Sweet Home" sign hanging behind us. I wondered, where had that home gone? I wondered if I could ever take it back, or if I had truly lost everything. Everything exploded one Saturday evening when I came home late from work. I stepped into the house exhausted after a long day at the airport, wanting nothing more than to sit down and have dinner with Monica and Noah. But as soon as I opened the door, I heard Marlene in the kitchen nitpicking at Quinn's vegetable chopping technique. "You're not doing it right, Quinn. You need to cut them smaller like I always do." Quinn was silent, but I could see her shoulders tense as if she were holding something back. In the living room, Harold was watching a football game, the volume so loud it drowned out Noah asking something about his game. I set my bag down, trying to stay calm, and asked, "What's for dinner, Quinn?" But before she could answer, Marlene cut in, her tone commanding, "Beef stew, Lincoln. But you're too late. The food's cold. I told Quinn to wait for you, but she said it wasn't necessary." I froze, feeling as if I'd been doused with ice water. I looked at Quinn, hoping she'd say something, stand up for me, but she just kept her head down, wiping the kitchen counter. It was a small thing, a cold meal, a thoughtless remark. But it was the straw that broke the camel's back. All the months of holding back, swallowing the feeling of being sidelined, all the moments I felt I was losing my kids, and Quinn erupted like a wildfire. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling. "Quinn, I need to talk to you. Now." She looked up, a flicker of worry in her eyes, but followed me out to the porch. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from the neighbor's yard. I stood there, gripping the railing, trying to rein in the anger surging in my chest. "Quinn," I began, my voice low but heavy. I've tried to keep the peace, to make things work. But I can't do this anymore. Your parents, they're controlling everything. They decide how we raise our kids, how we live. I don't feel like your husband anymore, like Monica and Noah's father." Quinn crossed her arms, her eyes cold, but I saw her lips tremble. "Lincoln, here we go again," she snapped, her voice sharp as if masking her own hurt. "My parents just want to help. Do you know how much they've sacrificed for me, for the kids? You've changed, Lincoln. You don't respect my family anymore." Her words cut like a knife, slicing deep into my heart. I looked at her, searching for the woman who once hugged me from behind, whispering that this was our home. But now she stood there, defending her parents as if I were the enemy. "Changed?" I shot back, unable to hold it in any longer. "Quinn, I've done everything to keep this family together. I stayed silent when your mom changed everything in our house, when your dad treated me like I'm invisible. I've tried to keep the kids out of this mess, but what about you? Don't you see I'm losing everything? Don't you see I have no voice in our own home?" My voice broke and my eyes stung, but I refused to cry, refused to let her see me weak. Quinn stepped back, her eyes a mix of anger and pain. "If you're so uncomfortable, Lincoln," she said, her voice icy, "then maybe you should stay somewhere else for a while. Maybe that'd be better for everyone." Her words were a final blow, leaving me breathless. I stared at her, searching for any sign that she didn't mean it, but all I saw was resolve in her eyes. She'd made her choice, not me, but her parents. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on the sofa in the study, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what had happened to our family. I thought of Monica, her red eyes as she told me she didn't want to bake with Grandma. I thought of Noah laughing as Harold called me too strict, and I thought of Quinn, her smile the day we moved in. All of it was now just a memory buried under unspoken conflicts. The next morning I packed a few things, some clothes, a toothbrush, and the family photo from my desk. I didn't say anything to Quinn, not wanting to make a scene in front of the kids. Monica and Noah were eating breakfast in the kitchen with Marlene pouring their milk. I kissed their foreheads, saying, "Daddy's got to go to work for a few days, but I'll call you, okay?" Monica nodded, her eyes worried, while Noah just grinned and said, Call us, Daddy. I forced a smile, hiding the ache in my chest, and walked out of the house. I rented a small room near the airport, a bare place with peeling paint and a creaky bed. It was cold, lacking the warmth of family, but at least here I didn't feel like an outsider. Every night I called Monica and Noah, listening to their stories about school and new games. Monica talked about a drawing she made, and Noah bragged about learning to throw a ball with Grandpa. I smiled, told them to sleep well, but when I hung up, I sat in that empty room, the weight of loneliness pressing on my chest like a stone. Quinn didn't call. Not a text, not a single check-in. Monica told me she was carrying on as if my absence didn't matter. I began to feel the deep sting of having a home I couldn't return to. That house with its white picket fence and home sweet home sign was now a distant luxury. I'd lost it, not because I didn't try, but because I didn't know how to fight my own family. In those long, lonely nights, I thought of my parents, George and Evelyn. They lived in a small town 2 hours from Des Moines, in a simple house where I grew up with warm memories. I remembered my dad with his calm, steady voice teaching me to fix a bike. I remembered my mom with her kind smile, always reminding me that family is where people respect each other. They were the only ones who could understand me now, who could help me find my balance. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep running, but first I needed to find myself again, the man who once dreamed of a home, who believed love could overcome any challenge. I closed my eyes, picturing Monica and Noah's faces, and promised myself that no matter what, I wouldn't lose them. But to do that, I needed help, and I knew where to turn. The small rented room became the place where I confronted myself. Every night after calling Monica and Noah, I lay there staring at the ceiling, letting childhood memories flood back like a gentle river. I remembered summer afternoons in the small town outside Des Moines, where my dad, George, sat in the shed, teaching me how to change a bicycle tire. He was never in a hurry, always patient, his deep voice like a steady melody. "Lincoln, you have to take it slow. Understand each part. Everything has its order." I, a 10-year-old boy, crouched beside him, hands smeared with grease, feeling like I was learning something far greater than bike repair. My mom, Evelyn, was the heart of our home. She had a way of making everything feel lighter, from baking cookies every Sunday to settling disputes between me and my brother. "Family is where you find peace," she used to say, her kind eyes fixed on me. But peace only comes when everyone respects each other. Back then, those were just my mother's words, but now, in the cold rented room, they echoed like a wake-up call. The home I shared with Quinn had lost that respect, not just between me and her parents, but between us. I realized I grew up in a simple but solid family. My parents weren't rich. Dad was a mechanic, mom an elementary school teacher. But they always set clear boundaries. They never meddled too deeply in each other's lives, never made anyone feel sidelined. Comparing that to my current home, where Marlene rearranged everything to her liking, where Harold claimed the living room as his own domain, I felt an unbridgeable gap. I'd tried to build a home like my parents, but now I was just a lost man. That weekend, I decided to drive to visit my parents. The road to their small town wound through golden cornfields under the autumn sun. When I pulled up to their weathered wooden house with its faded picket fence and Mom's small garden full of chrysanthemums, I felt my chest loosen. Mom opened the door, her kind smile unchanged, but her eyes held a trace of worry when she saw me. "Lincoln, you've gotten thinner," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. Dad, standing in the kitchen doorway, just nodded, but I knew he was watching me, as he always did when he sensed something was wrong. We sat in the living room around the old wooden table Dad had built 20 years ago. Mom made tea, Dad sat quietly, and I began to talk. I told them about the new house, how it had once been my and Quinn's dream. I told them about Harold and Marlene, how they'd taken over our space, how I felt pushed out. I told them about Quinn, our big fight, her cold words telling me to leave. And I told them about Monica and Noah, my fear of losing my kids. My voice trembled, and I had to pause, bowing my head to hide the tears welling up. Mom took my hand, her touch warm and steady. "Lincoln, you've tried your best," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "But you can't let others define your family. You have to fight, not by arguing, but by showing them who you are. A husband, a father." I looked at her, feeling like that 10-year-old boy again, seeking his mother's advice. But this time I didn't just need advice, I needed a way out. Dad, the quieter one, finally spoke. "Lincoln," he said, his voice solid as stone, "you need to reclaim your place. Not by kicking anyone out, but by reminding them this is your home. Bring us there. Let them see you're not alone." The idea stunned me. Bring my parents to live with us? It sounded like a crazy plan, but in that craziness I saw a glimmer of hope. Maybe if Quinn saw my parents, people who always respected boundaries, who put family first, she'd understand what I'd been trying to say all along. I stayed the night, sleeping in my old room where a high school basketball poster still hung on the wall. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, unhaunted by Harold's blaring TV or Marlene's commanding voice. The next morning, I told my parents, "I want you to come live with me for a while. I need your help." Mom smiled and nodded while Dad just clapped my shoulder, his way of saying he believed in me. Driving back to Des Moines with my parents in the back seat, I felt a new strength. I was no longer the man hiding in a cold rented room. I was Lincoln, the man who'd built a home, and I was going to take it back. Not to win, but to protect what I loved. Deep down, I knew this plan, bold as it was a gamble. Bringing my parents to live with Harold and Marlene could either restore my voice or ignite a bigger war. I gripped the steering wheel, picturing Monica and Noah's faces, and told myself, no matter what, I won't give up. The house came into view as I turned onto our familiar street, its white picket fence and "Home Sweet Home" sign still hanging on the door. But this time, as I stepped inside, I no longer felt the suffocation of before. My parents, George and Evelyn, followed behind, carrying a few small suitcases. Mom gave a gentle smile, her eyes full of encouragement, while Dad just nodded, his usual way of preparing for a challenge. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and called out, "Quinn, I'm home. My parents are here too." Quinn emerged from the kitchen, her apron still tied around her waist, hands dusted with flour. She looked at me, then at my parents, and for a moment I saw shock in her eyes. "Your parents?" she repeated, her voice slightly shaky. "They're staying here?" I nodded, keeping my tone calm. "Yeah. I thought it'd be good for them to stay for a while, to be close to the kids, to help us out." I deliberately echoed the reason she'd given when her parents moved in, hoping she'd catch my point. But the look in Quinn's eyes told me she wasn't prepared for this. Marlene appeared from the living room, Harold trailing behind, an unlit cigarette in hand. "George, Evelyn," Marlene said, her voice sweet but cold. "What a surprise to see you both." My mom smiled, responding with her usual courtesy. "We just wanted to be closer to the grandkids, Marlene. Hope we're not intruding." But I saw the way Marlene's hands tightened, the way Harold raised an eyebrow, and I knew the silent battle had begun. The first few days were a study in controlled tension. My parents tried to blend in, but the differences between the two sets of grandparents quickly became stark. My mom, Evelyn, was gentle and kept things orderly. She helped clean and cook, but never imposed. When Monica wanted to draw instead of bake, Mom just smiled, sat down with her, and picked up a crayon. Marlene, on the other hand, clung to her need for control. "Monica, you should learn to cook. It'll be useful when you're older," she said in her commanding tone, making Monica bow her head, her eyes avoiding contact. My dad, George, was calm but unyielding, refusing to be diminished. Once, when Harold bragged about his banking days, implying Dad's work as a mechanic was lesser, Dad looked at him, his voice steady as stone. "Harold, every job has value as long as it provides for family." The comment silenced Harold, but I saw a flash of irritation in his eyes. From then on, the two fathers engaged in a subtle war, trading seemingly harmless jabs loaded with hidden meaning. Quinn was caught in the middle trying to keep the peace, but I could see her growing exhausted. She darted between the two mothers, attempting to please both sides. One time I overheard her sigh in the kitchen when my mom suggested making her lentil soup, while Marlene insisted her beef stew had to be the main dish. "Mom, Evelyn, please, I'll make both," Quinn said, her voice almost pleading. I wanted to walk in, hug her, tell her I understood, but the distance between us remained like an invisible wall. Monica and Noah began to feel the heavy atmosphere. One afternoon, I found Monica curled up in her room, clutching her doll, her eyes red. "Dad, Grandma, and Nana don't like each other, do they?" she asked in a small voice. I knelt down, hugged her, and tried to find comforting words, but my heart ached. Noah, usually so lively, grew quieter, avoiding the moments when the two grandmothers clashed in the kitchen. I realized my plan, meant to reclaim my voice, was hurting my kids. But I couldn't stop. Not now, not after coming this far. The house became a battlefield with clear factions. The maternal side, Marlene and Harold, dominated the living room and kitchen, continuing to issue orders and exert control. The paternal side, my parents, rallied around me and the kids, trying to maintain a peaceful space. Every meal was a silent competition filled with veiled barbs and sharp glances. Marlene complained about my mom's cooking, calling it too bland. Mom just smiled, but I saw her knuckles tighten around her napkin. Harold mocked Dad for only knowing how to fix machines, and Dad responded with silence, though his eyes said he wouldn't back down. I tried to stay calm, but deep down, I knew I'd ignited a war. I wanted Quinn to see that family needed boundaries, needed respect, but instead I'd only made things worse. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the porch, staring at the yard, now silent as a graveyard. I wondered if I was doing the right thing or just dragging my family deeper into a quagmire. But there was no turning back. I'd gone too far, and now I could only wait to see how this fire would burn, or if it would consume everything. Our house, once a symbol of our dreams, had become a smoldering fire pit, where every action, every word poured fuel on the flames. The two mothers, my mom, Evelyn, and Marlene, were at the heart of every conflict. My mom, with her gentle and principled nature, tried to maintain order quietly. She cleaned, cared for the kids, but always respected Quinn's and my boundaries. Marlene, on the other hand, couldn't stop controlling. She changed menus, rearranged furniture, and even dictated Monica and Noah's schedules. "Quinn, you can't let the kids stay up this late," she'd say in her commanding tone, even though I'd explained that Monica needed time to draw before bed. Clashes between the two mothers happened daily, often in the kitchen, once the heart of our home to me. One time, my mom suggested making our family's traditional cookies for Monica and Noah's breakfast. Marlene, standing nearby, scoffed. "Cookies? The kids need something more nutritious, Evelyn. Let me make my omelets." My mom just smiled, but I saw her grip tighten on the wooden spoon, holding back her frustration. Quinn, caught in the middle, sighed and said, "Fine, make both." But I knew she was exhausted, trying to please both sides and failing. The two fathers weren't any better. My dad, George, was calm but resolute, and his firmness irked Harold. One afternoon, as they sat in the living room, Harold took a jab. "George, you've fixed machines your whole life. Probably don't know what it's like to manage a big family, huh?" My dad didn't respond, but his eyes said he wouldn't back down. Quinn, who once bridged me to the world, had become a faint shadow. She darted between the two families, trying to keep the peace, but I could see her growing more frustrated. When I suggested she ask her mother to stop meddling in our parenting, she snapped at me. "Lincoln, you brought your parents here and now you're blaming me? If you didn't want my parents here, why didn't you say so from the start?" I was stunned, wanting to explain that I just needed her to understand how I felt, but she turned away, leaving me with a sense of helplessness. The kids, Monica and Noah, began to feel the stifling atmosphere. Monica, ever sensitive, started retreating to her room, clutching her doll and drawing sad pictures. Houses without windows, people standing far apart. Noah, though still energetic, began avoiding family dinners where the two mothers and fathers vied to impose their opinions. Once he pulled me into the yard and whispered, "Dad, why is everyone always fighting?" I hugged him, searching for comforting words, but my heart ached, realizing my plan was hurting my kids. The breaking point came one evening when we all sat down for dinner, a rare attempt to maintain the facade of a united family. The table was laden with food, my mom's lentil soup, Marlene's beef stew, and a salad Quinn made to appease both sides. But the air was heavy, like a storm about to break. It started when Marlene remarked, her tone authoritative, "Monica, you're eating too little. You need more meat, or you won't grow tall." My mom, who'd stayed silent so long, finally spoke up. "Marlene, let the girl choose what she wants to eat. Forcing her isn't good." That comment lit a fuse. Marlene slammed her spoon down, her voice icy. "Evelyn, are you telling me how to raise my grandchildren? I raised Quinn just fine. I know what I'm doing." My mom, still gentle but unyielding, replied, "I'm just saying the kids need some freedom. They're not objects for us to control." The room shattered. Harold jumped in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "George, you should teach your wife how to talk or she'll stir up trouble." My dad, with a terrifying calm, responded, "Harold, I think you're the one who needs to learn respect." Quinn, seated at the head of the table, finally snapped. "Enough!" she shouted, standing up. "Everyone, stop it! Lincoln, why did you bring your parents here to turn this house into a battlefield?" My heart felt crushed as I looked at her. "Quinn, I just wanted you to understand how it feels to be pushed out of our own home," I shot back, my voice trembling with anger and pain. "But I was wrong, wasn't I? Because now you just see me as the selfish one." Monica, sitting nearby, burst into tears. Noah ran upstairs, his footsteps echoing on the stairs. The room fell silent, save for Monica's sobs and our heavy breathing. The next morning, Harold and Marlene announced they were leaving. "We can't stay here anymore," Marlene said, her voice thick with hurt. "If we're not welcome, we'll go." Quinn tried to stop them, but they were resolute, packing their suitcases in their wounded pride. The house grew quiet again, but it wasn't the peace I'd dreamed of. It was merely the lull after a storm full of cracks that couldn't be mended. I looked at Quinn, hoping for a hint of regret, but she just turned away, her eyes red. I knew my plan had worked. Harold and Marlene were gone, but the cost was a deeper rift with the woman I loved. I stood on the porch staring at the silent yard and asked myself, did I win, or have I lost everything? The days after Quinn's parents left, our house entered a strange state. No more arguments, no more of Marlene's commands or Harold's booming laughter. But the silence was heavy, as if the air still carried the smoke of the battle that had just passed. I went to work each day, returning to a home now occupied only by my parents, George and Evelyn, along with Quinn and the kids. My parents stayed quietly helping, but their presence, though comforting to me, was a constant reminder that the cracks in our marriage remained unhealed. Quinn grew quieter. She still worked, took care of Monica and Noah, but her smile, the one that melted me 15 years ago, was now as rare as sunlight in winter. She avoided my gaze, dodged long conversations. Whenever I tried to start one, asking about her day or the kids, she'd respond curtly and turn away, as if every word reopened a wound. I wanted to hold her, to say I was sorry for pushing things too far, but her distant eyes stopped me every time. The kids, thankfully, slowly regained their innocence. Monica stopped retreating to her room, and her drawings began to glow with bright colors again. One afternoon, she ran out to the yard, pulling me into a game of tag, her laughter ringing like a healing melody. Noah, with his natural energy, started asking his silly questions again, like, "Dad, can I keep a dinosaur in the backyard?" I laughed, ruffled his hair, but inside, Monica's question from weeks earlier echoed, "Is Grandma still mad?" It made me realize that though Harold and Marlene were gone, the wounds they left lingered, not just in me, but in the kids. My parents, George and Evelyn, stayed on but kept a delicate distance. Mom helped Quinn clean and played with the kids but never overstepped. Once I saw her sitting with Monica teaching her to fold origami, both giggling when a paper crane's wing came out lopsided. Dad, with his steady calm, spent time in the yard, fixing the fence or tossing a ball with Noah, but he never imposed his opinions. Their gentleness was something this house had lacked for too long, and I noticed that Quinn, though she didn't say it, seemed to sense it too. I caught her standing in the kitchen doorway, watching Mom and Monica, her eyes pensive. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between my mom and Quinn in the living room. I'd just come home from work and was about to walk in but stopped when I heard Mom's voice, gentle but weighty. "Quinn, you know, a home is only truly warm when everyone respects each other. Lincoln just wants this house to be peaceful, not for anyone to win." Dad, sitting in the corner, nodded and added in his deep voice, "Family is something you build together, not something one person controls." I froze, my heart pounding, waiting for Quinn's response. She didn't speak, but I heard her sigh, a sound heavy with exhaustion and regret. My parents' words were like a stone dropped into a still lake, stirring thoughts Quinn had perhaps tried to bury. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch with a cold cup of coffee. I thought about the early days when we moved in, when Quinn and I stood together looking out at the yard and dreaming of our future. I remembered how she hugged me from behind, whispering that this was our home. Now that yard was still there, but we'd become strangers, trapped between love and unhealed cracks. I wondered if Quinn was thinking the same, if she remembered those days, or if she was just lost in the pain I'd helped cause. Quinn stepped onto the porch, startling me. She stood there, arms crossed, gazing at the yard, silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Lincoln, I don't know when things went this far." I turned to her, my heart racing, waiting. I just wanted my parents to be close to the kids, to feel important. But I didn't realize I hurt you. Her words were like a faint light in the darkness, but I didn't dare hope too much. I replied, my voice hoarse, "Quinn, I just wanted us to be a family. I didn't want to fight you, but I couldn't let myself be pushed out." She nodded, still looking at the yard as if searching for something in the dark. "I know," she said, her voice trembling, "but I don't know how to fix this." I wanted to take her hand, to say we could start over, but I stayed silent, letting the quiet stretch between us. I knew that though we stood at the edge of breaking or healing, we needed time. Time to understand each other, to rediscover the respect we'd lost. The days that followed slipped into a strange phase, a fragile peace like the calm surface of a lake hiding turbulent currents beneath. My parents, George and Evelyn, began preparing to return to their small town. One morning, as I brewed coffee in the kitchen, Mom pulled me aside, her voice gentle but serious. "Lincoln, a home is only truly warm when both people want to keep it that way. You and Quinn need to talk, really talk. Not to win, but to find each other again." Dad, standing nearby, just nodded, but his eyes told me he believed I'd find a way. I looked at Mom, then at Dad, and felt a deep gratitude. They'd come here not to take over or fight my battles, but to remind me who I was. A husband, a father, a man who dreamed of a home. "Thank you," I said, my voice hoarse. Mom squeezed my hand and Dad clapped my shoulder, just as he'd done when I was a boy. A few days later, my parents left. They hugged Monica and Noah, telling them to stay healthy, then got in their car, leaving the house to just me, Quinn, and our kids. As their car disappeared down the road, I stood on the porch, feeling a strange emptiness. But with it came a flicker of hope. Now, without Harold, Marlene, or even my parents, it was just us, our little family. This was our chance to start over or face the truth that we might have gone too far. Quinn and I began talking more, though in short, fragmented exchanges. We discussed the kids' work, small things like fixing the fence or buying new curtains. Neither of us mentioned the big fight or offered clear apologies, but I sensed a shift in her. One evening, after Monica and Noah were asleep, Quinn stepped onto the porch where I sat with a coffee. She didn't speak, just sat beside me, looking out at the yard where the kids had played the day we moved in. The light from the living room spilled out, illuminating her face, and I saw her eyes glisten, as if holding something back. "Lincoln," she finally said, her voice soft but clear, "I was wrong. I let my parents and my sense of duty blind me. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." I looked at her, my heart racing, but I didn't interrupt. She continued, "I just wanted everyone to be happy, but I forgot that our happiness, yours, mine, and the kids, matters most." I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from my chest. "Quinn," I said, my voice rough, "I was wrong too. I pushed things too far, bringing my parents here to prove a point, but I only hurt everyone, including you." She turned to me, her eyes softening, and for the first time in months I saw the gentle smile I'd fallen in love with. We sat there, saying nothing more, just gazing at the yard. The night breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass, and I remembered the moment we stood here on moving day, with the "Home Sweet Home" sign on the door. That house, that dream, was still there, though obscured by cracks. But now I knew that, though it wouldn't be easy, we had a chance to rebuild it. As time passed, we began to find our old rhythm. Monica and Noah's laughter filled the house again, and the backyard echoed with games of tag. Quinn and I learned to talk, really talk, not to argue but to understand each other. We set new boundaries, not just with our families but with ourselves, to protect this home. But deep down I knew the journey wasn't over. The cracks remained, and the respect and love we were trying to rebuild were still fragile. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching Quinn laugh with Noah, I thought about the greatest lesson I'd learned. Family isn't a place free of conflict, but a place where we choose to stay, to mend and to love, no matter how hard it gets. I stood up, walked inside, and rehung the "Home Sweet Home" sign on the door. It had tilted during the chaotic months. It wasn't new anymore, but it stood there, a reminder that though the road ahead might be rough, Quinn and I could find our home again, one step at a time.